Another turnover for Utah. Edwards gets it back. Up ahead, Neesmith. Blocked! Edwards getting up!
He's the closest thing I've seen mentally and physically to Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan.
So it is time to talk about Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves. A hot button topic in the NBA over the past couple of weeks now is Anthony Edwards is progressing as a young up and coming star and how much is translating to wins out in Minnesota. Before we get into Anthony Edwards, I have to give a huge shout out to Minnesota. I actually tweeted about this not too long ago. Bro, Minnesota is actually a really, really fun team to watch. I appreciate what they're doing out there, even in games in which Karl-Anthony Towns has been absent and Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid recently, they've been missing a lot of games as well. But a team that I thought was going to fall off a little bit because Towns is now going to be out for the remainder of the year and potentially in the first round of playoffs. A team that I already had a lot of questions about continue to provide evidence that they're actually a really, really good team. As we record the video, they have the number 1 ranked defense. Offensively, they have slipped below league average without Karl-Anthony Towns in the roster, but still really good on both sides of the floor when everything is clicking. And yes, they do have their deficiencies on the offensive side of the floor, but they are a very, very well-coached team to where even with their deficiencies, it still feels like they're getting quality looks and getting all of the ample opportunities and squeezing the most out of the players on the roster. Mike Conley is the definition of a veteran leader, very consistent for what you're asking out of him. Kyle Anderson also gives you some quality minutes here and there. The unsung hero on this team has to be Naz Reid, most underrated player, and if not most, but definitely first team all underrated on the roster. Comes in, quality floor spacer, can give you points in bunches, really fills in the pseudo Karl-Anthony Towns role offensively while being a better option on the defensive side of the floor. You can go as far as to say, for the amount of money being made, you would probably want Naz Reid on your roster, but a great addition to this team. And then you have Rudy Gobert, obviously DPOY recipient over the past couple of years. He's leading that race this year, and there's a reason for this. He anchors the number 1 ranked defense in the NBA that peaks at historic heights when he is on the floor. And so all of this kind of makes sense, and it's a huge reason why they are in the hunt for the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. And not too many people assumed that was going to happen in the beginning of the season. I certainly wasn't one of them. I wasn't a believer in the duo big, Towns and Gobert out there with the questionable offensive rotation and firepower surrounding those two. The limited spacing was going to be questionable as well. And I think a huge reason why a lot of this is all coming together is because of their 22-year-old star in Anthony Edwards. So getting into that, and this year, it's been pretty impressive. I can't even hold you, especially over the last couple of weeks now. Huge block, huge dunk, great moments, infectious attitude, and the type of player that he is that has really catapulted him in conversations that I'm kind of torn on, okay? Let me just be honest with you. So on one end, who Anthony Edwards is this season, 22-year-old again, 26, 27 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, shooting splits of 46, almost 47, 37% from behind the arc, and 84% from the charity stripe. All translates to a 58% true shooting percentage, which is right at league average. And what really catapults him in these conversations is how he's getting these numbers and how he's producing and how he looks on the floor, because this isn't your average star. The type of shots that Anthony Edwards makes, the type of effort he gives on the defensive side of the floor, and the type of athleticism that is mixtured and compound with the moments that he provides to us is what really has gravitated many people to him, and it is the biggest reason why this team has started to usurp into conversations of title contention sooner than later. And what's even better is that as time has continued to progress and has really given us these glimpses of all-time great type of performances that really has us begging the question of how great he's going to be. As of late, over the last 20 games, again, a lot of these games are encompassing when Towns is out because of injury, but he's up the scoring production to nearly 30, 29 points per game, still giving you 5 assists, 6 rebounds, a steal and a half, and shooting splits are still very respectable. So the volume has gone up, but the efficiency has stayed the same. And again, it all kind of just begs the question of at 22 years old, Anthony Edwards is looking this good. What does that mean for the future, and how does this really correlate to the trajectory of not only him as a player, but also the Timberwolves? And I'm kind of torn in this conversation because admittedly, a lot of this looks a bit premature, and I think there's a lot of things going on. So for starters, let's go ahead and get the elephant out of the room. I think a lot of people gravitate to who Anthony Edwards is because of his style of play, because of the bravado, because of the way he holds himself, the way that he walks and he talks, the level of confidence that comes along with it as well. And let's just call a spade a spade. I got the man on my shirt. shirt. You know, you can see Jordan in the background right there. It's a lot of Kobe and Jordan-esque. And on one hand, I think that many people, especially older people, and I guess I'm throwing myself in that conversation as well, we find ourselves being thirsty for this type of athlete, this type of player, this type of star, where it is very nostalgic driven, where we praise him in that aspect and possibly put him in conversations that he doesn't belong in yet. Again, 22, these type of numbers, very respectable, very, very great in its own regard. But I tend to find myself catching myself not jumping off the deep end when I see Anthony Edwards on the floor, dribble between his leg in triple threat, pull up jumper in the midi or post fade, and I'm like, that's it. That's it. Over the shoulder. It's you know what I'm saying? Like I feel it. I see where the arm sleeves, all the accessories, the way the mannerisms, bro, it's there. And I catch myself like in nostalgia looking at him, and I don't want that to then be the reason why I put him in convos and put way too much expectations on him heading into this postseason. But it's the reason why I think there's a lot of people who gravitate to him, because he is the stereotypical, quintessential, traditional two guard that multiple generations have fell in love with. It's the lineage of Jordan, Kobe, Wade, and as much as I may appreciate Harden didn't really have that to his game because he played more of a ball handling type of a style. But jumping from those type of players to now Anthony Edwards, the stat line is very similar to what we saw from those players, the athleticism, the way, again, just mannerisms, it hits home for a lot of us. And I think that is what can potentially, you know, people get carried away with some of these comps, and I don't want to be a part of that. And the biggest reason why I say that is because everything in my body tells me that he's not that good, right? And when I look deeper into these numbers, and I just gonna be honest with y'all, bro, it really wasn't all that great. I mean, from mid, he's shooting like 35% on his mid-range jumpers. He's shooting like 20-some% on his post fadeaways, like his fadeaway jumpers. He's finishing at the basket slightly above league average. Like there's nothing really about Ant that screams Kobe, it certainly doesn't scream Jordan outside of the few moments, but it's like a part of me wants to turn off that part of my brain, and that's, in all honesty, respectfully, that's the smart side of my brain, but a part of me wants to just turn that part of my brain and ignore the fact that I just saw him do 4 post fades or 4 fadeaway jumpers in a mid-range, and he missed all of them. But that one though, that one, it put me back in that 08 mood. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to be able to just, you know, lean more in that nostalgia base, but I can't take myself out of reality and who he is. And I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. The other conversation that needs to be had is, you know, the conversation that the NBA community at large has been having over the past couple of months, and that is, we need a star, right? Like as much as we all may love, especially me, love Jokic and Giannis and Luka and all these foreign players, I've just accepted the fact that a lot of Americans are just xenophobic. A lot of Americans need someone that is identifiable. A lot of Americans need someone that they feel comfortable with rooting for. And that's just the reality. And over the past 7 years now, the NBA, we swung and missed on a lot of stars. Lonzo didn't pan out. Andrew Wiggins didn't pan out. Jabari Parker didn't pan out. Ben Simmons didn't pan out. And I think the last 2 stars before we got here now, Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, So now what ended up happening is that we're having this conversation of there not being a face of the franchise. The last 2 weeks now, it felt really forced with Tatum. Like it didn't feel like it was natural. But now it's like, are we kind of doing the same thing with Anthony Edwards? Because let's just, a spade, he's a Black American, uber athletic, has the defensive chops and really wants it from time to time. And it's like, yo, are we pushing him in a direction that he does not yet belong in? Because if you look deeper into the numbers, you look deeper into his game, there's not really much that's screaming the face of the NBA just yet. But even as I say that, the reason why I lean in a direction of making this type of video and praising him is because he's 22. I don't want to get too caught up in being overcritical of a 22-year-old who's finding himself, who's accepting new roles and responsibility on a team that's in the middle of a season that's very impressive, that's trying to make a lot of noise, and he's accepting that challenge. He's accepting that identity. He's accepting that role. And for the most part, putting things into context, again, 22 years old, only been in the league for a handful of seasons, I would argue he's exceeding that expectation. So though the metrics may not add up, he's not the most efficient volume scorer. He's breaking right at league average. Those ill-advised mid-range shots are not falling anywhere near close to where it justifies the volume. The moments of the passing, the playmaking, the lack thereof in that capacity, especially when we go into the postseason and defenses are throwing different schemes at him. There's a lot of things that would and should prevent me from, jumping the gun with Ant, but I want to do it because it feels right. I want to do it because it hits home with nostalgia. I want to do it because I believe in him, and I think that is kind of a part of the conversation and the progress of being the face of the NBA, having a whole community believing in who you are as an athlete and a player, and I think we're starting to see a lot of that occur right before our eyes. And again, to give Anthony Edwards credit, 22-year-old, he's doing essentially all the things that he needs to do, and I think that's going to further separate himself from everyone else, and it's fun to watch him. I just want to, tell everybody, let's pause for a second before we jump the gun and put him in convos that he doesn't yet belong in. I see people try to, put him in face of the NBA, try to put him closer to top 10, and he's not there yet. He's not there yet. But it is very enjoyable to see him play. It's great to watch him play basketball. He clearly wants it. He desires it. He has a passion of winning. He executes down the stretch. Some of these moments that he's given us is great, and I love watching him play. And I love watching the Timberwolves play. Again, I got to do a whole video about this Timberwolves team. But in terms of Anthony Edwards, applause to him. I want to just put on your radar, what he's doing this season. He's had multiple 30-point outings. That 44-point game that he had against the Indiana Pacers, where they came down the wire, they were to pull that game out. And this is, I want to say, this is when Towns was out as well. He stepped up to that plate, and he's starting to win more ball games. And they need this down the stretch of the regular season to make sure they secure home court advantage. And he's accepted that challenge. And I think that it's great to see that. Two-way star, give you great scoring production, still has a lot of room to grow. And I think that's another reason why people are excited and ecstatic about who he is as a player. But again, I think before we make these leaps, let him make the leap first. Let Ant make that superstar leap before we put him in conversations and start expecting way more out of him than we actually should. And when we get to that point, I think that it's going to be a really, really great story to see Anthony Edwards mature into the player, the star, superstar, and hopefully the face of the NBA that we all expect him to. But let's not force it on him just because we need another narrative base to run or somebody else to just give the reins to and the ropes to, because we failed to do so over the past couple of years and we've ignored all the Europeans and we can't sell them as much as we sold a lot of these other Americans over the past couple of years. Let's see him. Let's see what he does in the postseason. I'm excited. His playoff numbers in big moments looked great last season. He was averaging 31.5 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, really good shooting splits as well for his second time out in the postseason. So it's not like he shies away from big moments. So let's hope that he takes the next step, continues to progress. And I'm rooting for you, Ant. We all are. We want to see the best for you. Continue to give us greatness. But yo, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.